Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hey, I'm so glad you've joined us on Life Support. And what we do here is we love to tell stories about how God is reaching people and changing lives, and how God is all about redemption. And my guest again this week is George Lang. He's the executive director of FreedomWorks. We'll find out more about FreedomWorks in just a few minutes. And George, so great to have you again. And we left off at a crucial time in your life. You had described your childhood growing up in St. Paul, ended up in prison. God met you in a miraculous way. You even were going to put a choir robe on. It was so miraculous. You're probably not going to hear the end of that now. But you had gone through this transformation and mentored in prison, the first time you've really ever been mentored. Mm-hmm. And now, suddenly, as is the case with everyone, it's time to get out. And that's one thing I don't think people that aren't familiar with that kind of life don't really understand, probably, the difficulties or the challenges that come with that. And you said you still had your quote-unquote little gods out there. You still had your bar. You still had all these things you wanted to pursue. So tell me what happened next year. It's time to get out. What happened?
So before, this was about 6 to 8 months before I got out, I was offered work release. And they wanted to put me in St. Paul, about a mile away from all them gods. And I'm now about a year plus into my walk with Christ, and it's been an amazing journey, but I'm really afraid of going back. So as time went on, I turned down work release, and then they approached me again, and they gave me work release for the last 2 months. Instead of 8 months, I did 2 months. They found me a spot in Minneapolis. So I went there on a brief stint, but I was looking to go to FreedomWorks. And so FreedomWorks, the vision of FreedomWorks, I caught that when our founder, Fred Peterson, came in to Prison Fellowship. And he talked about what we had here on the inside of the bars is going to be on the outside. I just locked onto that vision. And so for me, I had this new faith, and it was, man, it was a deep faith at that time, but I'm about to get out, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to live really crime-free, drug-free, chaos-free. I don't know how to live life in faith of Christ. Well, you didn't even have any men in your neighborhood hardly, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by these mentors. And all the guys that while I'm in prison fellowship, that keep coming back, they always end up doing the same thing. They go back to the same place, they get the same result. Mm-hmm. They get violated, come back. I didn't want to do this again. I couldn't do it again. I was fighting for my life. Nehemiah is a book I love. Mm-hmm. In Nehemiah chapter 4, I believe it's verse 12, says, we got to remember we're fighting for our wives, fighting for our children, fighting for our houses. And so for me, the marriage was dissolved, but my children, and I just couldn't I didn't want to come back. And so I went to FreedomWorks, and what I found there was a very small group of men that I knew on the inside of prison, also mentors that would come in weekly were there, so I had familiar faces. If I didn't have that, I can guarantee you I would have leaned back into what I know. But they kept me accountable, encouraged. One of the biggest hurdles I had to get over was my anger. I'm not sure if I'm over it yet, but I'm used to reconciling things with a baseball bat. That's normal for me. Stabbing, shooting, I don't know. But I had so many things against me and so many wrongs against me that my old life was saying, you got to go back and save face. You got to go back and handle this. Mm-hmm. People were expecting me to come back, and this is what I did my whole life.
You had to play the part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It's all I know. I got to get revenge. I got to get, But the people that surrounded me knew what I was going through. One in particular, he attached me to his hip, and that was Randy Washington. Was then in prison a biblical counselor during the day. Now on the outside, he's an associated pastor to a church I go to right down the street, North Minneapolis. And he really had to sacrifice his time to keep me grounded. I mean, this wasn't just like once a week I had a little fit.
Yeah.
It was like once an hour. Mm-hmm. My whole life is 20 minutes away and somebody else has it.
Yeah.
And that was not easy for me to let go.
Well, including your wife and everything, right?
Yeah, that's just, that's, my bar, just everything.
It's a big deal.
So, and we continued in family court, and so I can't see my kids. She was using the kids for me to sign over my bar to her. The Department of Corrections and Community Corrections had a ban on me going into St. Paul. They didn't want me in St. Paul because they were, again, a lot of people were calling and saying that they were afraid that I was going to do them harm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't go see my kids. There was just so many things against me, and it really took these guys that I call now mentors to be able to keep me through that. But, this didn't go on for like a month. It was 2.5 years, or 4 years of being out. When I finally settled, we finally got a visitation order to see my kids, and things started to slow, kind of pan out. There was also, God had used Freedom Works to keep me stable, right? Work or any of that, even though most of my life I grew up in crime, I mean, I had basic functions or life skills, we'll call it. But during the time that I realized, the more I'm going to use that word again, volunteered, stayed busy, I needed to stay busy, real busy. But when I started to serve, I started noticing a lot of the guys that were coming out of prison they didn't know how to cook. They didn't have, they didn't know how to set alarm clocks to go to work. What is that?
Right. Yeah.
Or we were in a self-pay program, and a lot of guys didn't have the ability to, there was guys that couldn't get a job, guys that could get a job, and then they couldn't keep a job. They'd get a paycheck and quit. And there was fewer that was able to come out and, acclimate back into society without a lot of help. There are far and few in between. So I started helping guys. I'm going to refer to a scripture here out of Jeremiah 29. Everybody quotes it. I know the plans I have for you. That's not the one I'm quoting here. The one I'm quoting is right before that, verses before that. God says, I'm sending you to prison for 70 years. You're going to Babylon. But while you're there, serve others. And in there, you're going to find your healing. Isaiah says, he's talking about the fast. Is this not the fast that I called you to help others? And when you do, when you clothe the naked, when you feed the hungry, when you give water to the thirsty, you're going to find your recovery is going to come forth speedily, right? That's in Isaiah. Well, these scriptures are alive to me at that time. These are real scriptures, and I'm finding more and more sobriety, stability in my life by serving others. And somewhere in there is when Isaiah 42 comes along and my calling in 2009. And then since then, I just haven't, I have looked back sometimes, but
yeah, sure. Yeah. And so suddenly God had you on this course now where you were going to help guys make that transition. And how difficult is it? I mean, really, again, if you haven't lived it, it's hard to know what those obstacles are. What are men and women facing as they get out?
Well, I think the first thing that had to come over was the culture shock of now going back to that old culture. That's all we know. And again, time and time again, guys go back to doing the same thing. They go people, places, and things, and they get the same result. So you got to get over that one. But there's basic life skills that guys need. Not everybody, right? But for those that really have a hard time with not being caught up in to recidivate and go back, they got to become stable. So they've got to get jobs. There's a lot of skills that got to be acquired that most people assume because you're 45 years old. Well, he knows how to do that. No, don't assume it. He doesn't know how to do it.
Right.
But then the community, and of course, the most of all for me, even though I've now built an organization that serves, that doesn't force our faith on anybody. It's in everything we do, but it's not forced on anybody. To have faith and that's where our hope is going to come from. And for us, it's in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so when guys get basic life skills, they transition, they get away from their old relationships, and now they start to build that relationship with Christ. Kind of sounds like my journey from being in prison. I had to do these things on the inside of prison. We have just higher, great outcomes. I mean, guys, we have a lower recidivism rate. And I don't really throw that word around. It's hard for me to pronounce, let alone throw it around.
Yeah.
But guys are not returning to their old life. Mm-hmm. So
that's a huge victory then.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, because I can only imagine that, we all want to drift back to what we know.
Yeah.
And there's always that comfort level. And when you're on the verge of something new, especially when you don't have the kind of support that that has to be very difficult. But I'm intrigued by the man who put you on his hip for all that time and was basically mentoring you 24/7.
Yep.
I mean, that's a pretty amazing story. And we always think of like, it's funny, in churches people are always afraid to get into mentoring relationships because they think they have to pull out like a Bible study and a Bible, and
he did
go to the restaurant, and we're going to meet once a week, and we got to do all this stuff. And basically, he just cared about you, right? I mean, he was your friend. Yeah,
he did.
Yeah,
he kept his hand on the pulse, so to speak, or his fingers on the pulse. Mm-hmm. And when I needed encouragement, he gave it. When I needed to be reminded of God's promises and His Word, he'd say it. When I needed just a friend or accountability, he just was able to adjust. And I don't think that I would. I'll just say that if it wasn't for him and others, I had a mentor that was given to me, formal mentor in prison fellowship. His name was Craig Anderson. He's another guy that stuck to me, but he stuck to me in a different way. That was a different relationship. So I believe that God knows exactly what we need.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah.
And so that relationships, they haven't dissolved. They're still in my life. But, during that season, when the season ended, then God would bring the next one. So if I could fast forward even to Freedom Works of, what we were used to of the old model to this new model, we acquired a property that was, we didn't have any money. And there was at one time valued at $10 million, 9 or 10 million, give or take, I guess. So I needed business mentors, but the business mentors that he brought were Christian view, worldview. Mm-hmm. Their worldview was centered in Christ.
Yeah.
And they brought a kingdom view of what God was doing to acquire this property. So we ended up acquiring this property for, $2.5 million. We've probably put about $5+ million into the property. Well, we don't even got 2 nickels to scratch together.
Yeah.
So this is a testimony in its own. But if I didn't have that support from the business, I guess I don't know what to call them, business acclimats that they have, this experience. But if it wasn't for their kingdom view in that business, we wouldn't be serving the 190 guys today. So that's a different mentor, right?
190 guys is a lot of guys.
Well, we can serve up to 193.
Right, yeah. But I remember, in my life, I look back, and through each season of life, God brought someone.
Yeah.
A man who would maybe be at a church or just know somebody, or I would meet, and then for that season,
it's been incredible.
That man would just teach me things and walk me through things, and then you never lose the relationship, but the relationship changes because then God brings in another person for the next season with different expertise.
There was a season, of anger.
Yeah.
So remember, I reconcile through a baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
You do me wrong, hit you over the head. That's normal. Well, somebody's got to come alongside of me and challenge that. That's a difficult one to be able to come alongside somebody and say, your behavior is not acceptable, and to put the mirror up. And I've got quite a few of them guys that were able to stick with me through that. That didn't disappear overnight. I lived my life one way for 35 years.
Yeah.
And they had to, again, kingdom view, relationship with Christ. But that's dedication. You know what I mean? That's serving. That's serving. And I think a lot of people, being in churches, they shun away from mentoring guys like myself because of the stereotyping. I get it, all the different difficulties. But I guess God touches the right hearts, right?
Yeah.
He opens up the hearts to be able to walk alongside.
Yeah. Well, you have people gifted to disciple different people.
Yeah.
So guys who own high-end businesses need discipleship, and guys in prison need discipleship, and it takes different kinds of people to disciple each one of those. Neither is more important or less important. It's just different, And
I think different.
Yeah.
And there is a stereotype too. And you just hit on
I'm
it
sure there are. Yeah.
That what is a mentor? A mentor doesn't need to know 1,000 scriptures in the Bible.
No.
Just doesn't.
No.
Or he doesn't need to be the Elon Musk of business either,
right.
To come alongside of you. But I believe the mentors that we're talking about have to give their heart to Christ.
Yeah.
And just let Christ guide them.
Well, they just basically guide you by their Christian worldview.
Amen.
And there wasn't some big thing. It was like, here's how we see the world through Scripture and through what God's done, and so here's what you should probably do with that. And you were smart enough to listen and learn, and that's the other side of mentorship. You have to be willing to soak this stuff in and actually
I have a
react.
mentor that says that he mentors at Freedom Works today. He's always looking for a fat person. You know what a fat person is? Faithful, available, and teachable.
That's good.
And so that always stuck on my mind. So there's days I'm not teachable. I don't want to hear it. I got it all figured out.
Sure, of course.
But usually when I got it all figured out, it doesn't end well for me. So I've got mentors that, remind me to stay teachable.
So you're saying it's okay to be fat?
And it's okay.
That's what I heard from that whole conversation. Okay. All right, so Freedom Works, we talked about it in our last segment. Tell me a little more about Freedom Works again.
So Freedom Works being a reentry and recovery, we serve, there's a capacity of 193 men in 7 different programs. Our latest program is with women. So we're expanding that program. We'll have the capacity to serve 12 women. With women come children. Mm-hmm. So at Freedom Works, we have on our North Minneapolis campus on Emerson, we have our administration building, which is connected to our Achievement Center, which is the transitional programs. And then there's the next step. We have our graduate apartment. It's an apartment building, but it's not, they have single units. And so the women and men there have custody of their children. So that's very unique. That separates us from a lot of different reentry. Christ is going to be at the forefront of us. But for us, when we look at reconciling to God, family, and community, we always did really good on reconciling to, God and family, God and community, but not so much family. So when we bought this property, one of the first units we got ready was a family unit. Mm-hmm. The family unit was meant for guys that are in transitional programs. When they're doing their program, they could sign this unit out and have overnights with their kids.
Oh, wow.
That's unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
So then we moved to one of our staff members got engaged, and he's a valued staff member, and he said, would you consider me moving in with my bride? And I said, I really got to pray through this one because this is a men's reentry. So then God got out, he led me and said, yeah. Mm-hmm. So out of that, his wife serves at another ministry called Healing House. And so then women don't have a lot of resources for different reasons. But so we said, well, okay, let's open up 4 apartments or 4 units for women. Then it was 8 and then now we're expanding that again. And so FreedomWorks has a variety of different things happening. So we needed to create volunteer opportunities for our guys.
Sure.
Because not a lot of places allow our guys to. We also wanted to be a beacon of light in North Minneapolis. So we opened a food shelf. It's called the Bread of Life Food Shelf. And we now serve roughly 500 families a month.
Wow.
To our surrounding neighbors. So that God had hit me with a vision of not only serving Jerusalem, that's our campus, but then reaching out to Judea. And then now we got Samaria. How are we going to reach Samaria? So we opened up a catering company called Jailbreakers. And the tagline, "You won't escape the flavor." And
you are an entrepreneur.
We are. I am. Yeah. I love it. But this is meant for the serving opportunities come through Bread of Life, and we've typically got 25 to 40 guys a week that are serving down there, and they love it. So they used to take, right? Now they're getting, or now they're giving, and their time, and they see the impact it's doing to families. But Jailbreakers was more of a on-the-job training program to teach life skills. Remember the basic life skills, like setting your alarm clock, showing up to work on time, them types of things. But that's is going to morph into a culinary art program, and that's going to come with not only preparing. We prepare on campus over 5,000 meals, but we're now expanding into the food truck and other areas to be able to bring forth. By the way, if I haven't said I haven't, everything is going to be in the center of Christ. Is going to be at the center of it. Yeah. So when he's saying to meet the needs of Jerusalem or Judea, when food participants or those that partake in the food shelf, they're getting hit with the gospel.
Yeah.
When we go out in the food trucks, that's just another way for us to be able to be a beacon of light and to be able to share the gospel with those that need to hear it.
Well, listening to you talk, I never doubted that for a second, because that seems to be what you're all about.
We're pretty excited.
You have a great story. And myfreedomworks.com.
Myfreedomworks.com.
And you can't escape the flavor?
You can't escape the flavor.
I love it, man. That's like the best. That should be on every billboard in town. That's the best.
Well, people say, why do you call it Jailbreakers? So just real short with that, because most of us come out of prison trying to put away who we are. So I'm embrace it. And when we embrace who we are, this is just what God is doing in our life. People are more receptive to that. And and we want to be able to glorify God. So we want to be able to show those that are going through our program have changed their life.
Yeah.
For Christ. So.
Well, God definitely has changed yours. And thanks so much for sharing that with us. It was really encouraging.
Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate that. That's George Lang, Executive Director, FreedomWorks, myfreedomworks.com.